Be blessed, God. Have your way in this place tonight. We'll forever, God, to give you the glory, the honor, and the praise. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Come on, give God a hand clap of praise. Hallelujah.
Amen.
Amen. Good evening. I want to thank Sister Tabitha for that prayer. Amen. And I'm going to turn this way a bit because I was studying this on the computer. On our computer, Pastor has this program called eSword. It has all the different kind of Bibles and all the definite, like everything you need to study, like in one place. So I'm studying this, and from what I told y'all last week, when I went to go get my Bible, because I wanted to look, read the scriptures out of my Bible, the whole chapter, the stuff I needed for the lesson, that page was missing from my Bible. So it's just gone. Like, at least I read the book of Genesis a lot because the pages are gone. I didn't even know the pages had fallen out. So I'm gonna need to read from up here. I'm gonna need the Message translation as we go through this evening. On last week we talked about Abraham and Ishmael, and I got in the car to go home, and Pastor was like, I didn't know where you was going with all this history lesson you gave us. But it kind of tied together. It just gave you some background on why Abraham is so important. He's more important than what we think, to more than just us, more than just Christians. And it shed some light on why things are going on in the world, and how sometimes in the church and in our families and our lives, it mirrors what, has happened through the ages.
Yeah.
It's mirroring what's going on, because we talked about family strife, basically. Even though we go through jealousy, we go through turmoil, we go through different things in our family, just like we found out Abraham and Ishmael and Hagar and all of them did. We're still all tied to the same God. We're still all tied to the same Father.
Right.
In our natural families, we're family, we're blood related, we're connected by our DNA. Just as well in the church, we're connected by our spiritual DNA. And so we don't have to fight amongst ourselves.
Come on now, yes.
If we really think that, we really focus on the fact that we're all connected no matter what by the same Father.
Amen.
And so I'm not going to go back through my history lesson. It was really good though. I'm not going to go back through the history lesson, but I am going to, kind of pick up. And we talked about Abraham's many sons that he had and all the confusion that having those two sons caused. But this week we're going to talk about how Abraham missed his blessing. He had two sons. He had a promise from God, yet and still he missed his blessing. And it's all going to tie together in the end. And what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to miss your blessing. That's what I was telling Pastor this morning.
Yes.
When I read this, it all, this is what triggered it all. Because I said before, we miss our blessing sometimes because it doesn't come packaged the way we want it to.
Right.
And we've heard that before. It's not going to come looking like you want it to all the time. But we really have to stop and think, how many times have we missed out on something that would have benefited us, something that was sent to us by God, something that God allowed to happen, and because it didn't feel good to us, because it didn't look good to us, it didn't, act good the way we thought it was supposed to act,
Amen.
We rejected it.
Right.
When really it could have been a blessing to us.
Right.
You want to So if you could please turn with me to Genesis chapter 17. That's where we're going to start. I'll give you the verse in a second. I just want everybody to get to Genesis 17. So we're going to talk about Ishmael and Hagar and all of those people again. but we're going to talk about what we didn't learn in Sunday school, because we've been mistaught a little bit. And we all have our favorite Bible characters and our favorite Bible stories. And this is one of them for me. You know, the story, of course, of how Isaac came to be, and he was in the lineage of Jesus, as we learned last week. But what they didn't teach us was one of the most important things, I think, that we failed to learn was that, we are taught that Abraham got rid of Hagar, or put Hagar out of the house because God told him to. How many of y'all were taught that in Sunday school? That God told Abraham to get Hagar out of the house, you know, to send her and Ishmael away. That is not correct. God never said that. As a matter of fact, last week we learned that when Hagar left the first time, she left twice. The first time she left on her own, she was running scared from Sarah. And God told her to go back. And she went back. And she had the baby. And after she had the baby, Sarah was still jealous. And eventually Sarah got pregnant and had her baby that God had promised. But she was still jealous. And she was causing strife. And she told Abraham to send them away. And God spoke to Abraham, but God never told him to send Hagar and Ishmael away. It was never God's purpose. It was never his promise. It was never in God's will for Hagar and Ishmael to be outside of the house. We're taught that God told Abraham to get rid of Hagar and Ishmael, but he wasn't supposed to. He wasn't, we're taught that because we think that he wasn't supposed to have a son other than what God had said he was going to have through Sarah. So when Ishmael came along, we looked at that as being something wrong, that wasn't in the will. And so we're taught that God told him to send him away because he wasn't supposed to have a son by another woman, that God was going to give him a son through Sarah. So if you turn to Genesis 17 and 15, we're going to read this. It says, God continued speaking to Abraham, and Sarai your wife, don't call her Sarai any longer, call her Sarah. I'll bless her. Yes, I'll give you a son by her. Oh, how will I bless her? Nations will come from her. Kings of nations will come from her. Abraham fell flat on his face, and then he laughed. So we talked last week about how Sarah laughed, but Abraham was the first one to laugh. And we talked about how Isaac's name means laughter. And then he laughed, thinking, can a 100-year-old man father a son? And can Sarah at 90 years have a baby? Recovering, Abraham said to God, oh, keep Ishmael alive and well before you. And we'll stop right there. We'll get back to that scripture right there. So to sum all of that up, we read that and we think God said he was going to give Sarah and Abraham a son, and that son is the son. So when Ishmael comes along, because of what Sarah did, we want to reject the thought, the very existence of that son, because that's not what God promised, right? Raise your hand, because I was shaking my head. I was like, yep, you sure right, Holy Ghost, that's what we do. But where does it say in there, where does it say that Abraham cannot have any more children? It doesn't say that. God said that he would give Sarah a son. God did not say, you and Sarah are only going to have one son. It did not say that. And so, if you, in my study, and if you go and study, the word give in Hebrew, it means to appoint or assign. God was going to assign a specific child. Didn't say he couldn't have any other ones, but he was going to assign a specific one. And if God didn't have a plan for Ishmael, he would have never existed, because God allows everything. And if God allowed Ishmael to be born, God had a plan for him. Because God doesn't just do stuff to be doing it and then, just watch it fail, watch it fall, watch it go wrong, watch it destroy, a family and destroy lives. He doesn't do that. He had a plan for Ishmael the same way he had a plan for Isaac. Not like us. We do stuff and we're just like, well, I hope this is going to work. We're going to sit back and see what happened. And when I was writing this down, it reminded me of 4th of July a couple of years ago, where we were all at Tyler's house and we decided that we didn't want to go sit in the crowds. We were going to do our own fireworks show, because where she lives, you can actually do the fireworks or where she lived, you could do the fireworks out in your neighborhood. So we went, Pastor goes, Corey goes, my son-in-law, Chris, they all go and buy fireworks. And we're outside. And they're, lighting the fireworks, and we're like oohing and ahhing. And then they get excited because we get to this one particular type of firework, whatever it was. And it lights, but every time you lit it, it would fall over. And then it started spinning. And then it started shooting out powder, pyrotechnics, or whatever it's called, all over the neighbors, under cars, grass, trees, everything. And so we're like, something is going to blow up. So I take Isabella and we jump in the back of the car in the driveway because we want to be out of harm's way. They continue to light the fireworks. They get to the same type of firework. They light it again. It falls over. It does the same thing. It's going under cars. It's going in the grass. We didn't have a plan the first time. We don't have a plan the second time. We're just going to hope and pray and, see if it falls over or not. This time, it hits a bush. The bush catches on fire. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have a water hose. We didn't have anything. That's how we do stuff.
Yes.
We just say, well, I'm just going to go apply for this job and see what happens. I'm just going to go and marry this guy and see what happens. He's going to change. I'm just going to go and, I'm going to apply for this credit card. I'm going to buy this house and just see what happens. God, you're going to have to make it work. God is not obligated to make anything work if you have not put him in it, if he has not directed you down that path. So God tells Abraham, I'm going to give you a son. Sarah jumps in it. But because God has already called Abraham righteous, God is going to work it out. God has given a plan for Ishmael. That's not God's promise, but God tells them, I'm going to bless him because he sees something in Abraham. Because, as we learned last week, when Hagar conceived, and Sarah started being ugly towards her, she ran away. They started having some real strife. It had to get real ugly in that house for her to take off running and just pack up and leave while she's pregnant with nowhere to go. So, as she's out in the wilderness by herself, God speaks to her. God speaks to her and tells her, I think it's in 15, Genesis 15, 4 and 5. Is that it? 16 and 9, I'm sorry. Maybe 16 and 9. Yes. The angel of God said, go back to your mistress. Put up with her abuse. God would not send you back into a hostile place if he didn't have a plan for you.
Yes. Yes.
We want everything to be smooth and easy. I'm quite sure when she saw this angel and she realized God was speaking to her, she thought God was going to say, go back. I'm gonna fix her. I'm gonna make it all right for you. I'm gonna put her out. You are carrying his air. Like, no, God said, go back and put up with her abuse. That's what God told her. So you know God had a plan. God had a plan. If God didn't have a plan for Ishmael, and we know that he has a plan because he's God, he's not like us. God doesn't just do something. You know, he don't just start lighting fireworks and let everything catch on fire. And if he does let it catch on fire, it's because he got a reason for it, and you're going to see it in the end, not because he don't have a water hose to put it out. We know God has a plan because he told her to go back and put up with the abuse. And then if you go back into 15, Genesis 15, if we back up where God said, Genesis 15 and 4. Then he said, then God's message came, don't worry, he won't be your heir. A son from your body will be your heir. This is Abraham talking to God about his servant, Eliezer,
Yes.
I think it was, his heir. He was saying, God, you know, what are you going to do for me? I don't have any kids. So is Eliezer my servant that's been with, am I going to take him as my son? Am I going to take his sons as my son? God said, no, his son won't be your heir. You're going to have your own heir. Keep going. Then he took him outside and said, look at the sky. Count the stars. Can you do it? Count your descendants. You're going to have a big family, Abram. So God walked him outside, told him to look up at the sky, said, if you can count all those stars, that's how many sons you're going to have. And we already learned that God fulfilled his promise because Abraham had Jewish sons, he had Islamic sons,
Hallelujah.
he had Christian sons. We went through that last week. If you weren't here, you better ask somebody. Okay. So, God fulfilled his promise. Now, here he's telling him, I'm going to give you all these descendants, as many as the stars in the sky. And so we fast forward 10 years. Did somebody say wait time?
Wait time.
That's that wait time. Sarah couldn't handle the wait time. So she's still not pregnant. So there's no son from Sarah. So that's when Hagar comes into the picture. And then we fast forward a little bit more to Genesis 17, starting at verse 1. And we're going to read all the way through 23 because you got to get the background. When Abram was 99 years old, God showed up and said to him, I am the strong God. Live entirely before me. Live to the hilt. Like live on 10 for God. I'll make a covenant between us, and I'll give you a huge family. Overwhelmed, Abraham fell flat on his face. Then God said to him, this is my covenant with you. You'll be the father of many nations, with an S. Nations. We learned about them nations last week. Your name will no longer be Abram, but Abraham, meaning that I am making you the father of many nations. I'll make you a father of fathers. I'll make nations from you. Kings will issue from you. I'm establishing my covenant between me and you, a covenant that includes your descendants, a covenant that goes on and on and on, a covenant that commits me to be your God and the God of your descendants. And I am giving you and your descendants this land where you're now just camping, this whole country of Canaan, to own forever, and I'll be their God. God continued to Abraham, and you will honor my covenant, you and your descendants, generation after generation. This is the covenant that you are to honor, the covenant that pulls in all your descendants. Circumcise every male. Circumcised by cutting off the foreskin of the penis. It will be the sign of the covenant between us. Every male baby will be circumcised when they are 8 years old, generation after generation. This includes house-born slaves, slaves bought from outsiders who are not blood kin. This is everybody that comes into his house. These are the people of God, the Israelites. These are the people that are outside of the Israelites. That's us. We are all included in what God is talking about in Genesis 17.
Amen.
That's us. Make sure you circumcise both your own children and any brought in from the outside. That way my covenant will be cut into your body, a permanent mark of my permanent covenant. So even then, God was permanently marking his people, just like he permanently marked Jesus on the cross.
Hallelujah. Yes.
He was saying, these are mine. An uncircumcised male who has not had the foreskin of his penis cut off will be cut off from my people. He has broken my covenant. God continues speaking to Abraham. And Sarai, your wife, do not call her Sarai any longer, call her Sarah. I'll bless her. Yes, I'll give you a son by her. Oh, how will I bless her? Nations will come from her. Kings of nations will come from her. We read this. Can you skip to 20? And Ishmael. Yes, because Abraham was saying, he started laughing. Remember we read that earlier. He started laughing, and what he was saying to God, oh, I wish that Ishmael could live before you. That word live means to be revived. So God is telling him, I'm going to give you a son, and he's thinking, well, I already have a son, Ishmael. What are you going to do? Make him reborn again, rebirth him, revive him over again, and do this thing through him. And God says, I hear you talking about Ishmael. Yes, I've heard your prayer for him. I'll also bless him. I'll make sure he has plenty of children, a huge family. He'll father 12 princes. I'll make him a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will give to you about this time next year. So he's making it plain. I understand you have another son. I never said you couldn't have any other children. But my covenant, the descendants that I'm talking about that are going to be marked as mine, they're going to come through Isaac. God finished speaking with Abraham and left. God dropped the mic. He was done. As far as he was concerned, he was finished. He said, I'm going to bless Ishmael. My covenant is with Isaac. So you don't have to worry about either one of your children. But, and it goes on to say that Abraham went home. He circumcised everybody like God told him to. Everybody got circumcised. Every slave got circumcised. Every servant, everybody in his house got circumcised. And you would think that meant he was listening. And he was being obedient to what God was telling him to do. And that he believed and he was going to push forth down the path that God was sending him and just listen to God and be focused on God. But that's not the case. Because in his house, he had that one of those 4 things that we talked about that will destroy your house, your family, the church, a ministry, your life. Jealousy. Sarah was still jealous. She was still walking in the sin of jealousy. She was now transgressing her jealousy onto Abraham. And we're going to talk about how she turned that transgression into an iniquity until she died. So jealousy was working through her. Abraham couldn't even see what God was doing. He couldn't see that God had already blessed him. He was so focused on listening to Sarah in his ear that he didn't realize what God had already done. They were worried about what God said he was going to do. But God was already blessing them because Ishmael was already there. Ishmael was already there, and we've established that there was no prerequisite, for Isaac to be born. God just said, I'm going to give you a son. I'm going to establish or I'm going to confirm my covenant through him. I'm going to raise up my people through him. I'm going to bless Ishmael, but my covenant is with Isaac. There was never any requirements mentioned that, for Isaac to be born. God didn't say, if you do this, 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 and this, I'm going to give you a son. He just said, I'm going to give you a son. No strings attached. No prerequisite, no requirements. Just because Ishmael was born didn't mean that Isaac wasn't coming. Just because Ishmael was there didn't mean that Isaac wasn't coming. Just because Ishmael was there didn't mean that God was going to renege on his promise. God is not a man that he should lie. He can't lie. And even if he did lie, it would become the truth. Because he can't lie. So there you go. So either way it go, Isaac was coming. And if Abraham had been listening to God instead of Sarah, and if Sarah is one of y'all favorite Bible characters, I'm sorry I'm messing up y'all perception of Sarah. But Sarah was out of line. If Abraham had been listening to God instead of Sarah, you know, this whole chapter would look so much different. The whole Middle East might not even be at war. People might be able to go to both sides of the wall, of the wall, instead of having to pick a side. So anyway, y'all wasn't here last week. I had to ask somebody. So there is no requirements mentioned. Just because Ishmael was born didn't mean Isaac wasn't coming. And if we want to, you know, apply that to our lives today, a lot of times we think we missed it. We missed it because I married Bozo. Just because you married Bozo does not mean Boaz is not coming. He's coming. If God told you he's coming, he's coming.
Amen.
Just because you had to work as the intern, the unpaid intern, doesn't mean that the CEO position is not coming. If God told you it's coming, it's coming. A lot of times we look at our lives and we look at what we're going through and we think we missed it. Just because I already had 3 kids out of wedlock, I'm never going to get married. Nobody's ever going to want me. I'm never going to have no more kids, you know, with a daddy. If God told you and you believe that you will be married and the wife of one husband and the mother of children, then it's coming. Just because those 3 are here and their daddy is not, does not mean that God does not see you. He's the God who sees.
Yes. Come on now.
If you weren't here last week, you better ask.
Come on,
The God who sees.
Amen.
It's all about wait time. The wait time. We get frustrated in the wait. We get frustrated in the wait. We gotta work on wait time. So God never intended for Hagar and Ishmael to live outside of Abram's house. And we know this because he told her to go back. We also know this because of Genesis 21 and 12. Genesis 21 and 12. But God spoke to Abraham. Don't feel badly about your boy, talking about Ishmael, and your maid. Do whatever Sarah. Do whatever Sarah says.
No, go back.
What did
Remember,
it
you
say?
gotta hit the other part where it'll. No. Yeah.
Tells you, your descendants will come through Isaac. No matter what you do, your descendants are coming through Isaac. Now, where we get the interpretation that God said send them away, because we read that do whatever Sarah tells you, and in the King James it says, tell me what it says. It says, hearken, Abraham, hearken unto your wife, hearken unto Sarah. But if you dig a little deeper, that word hearken in Hebrew, in this context, it's all about context, and Abraham wasn't paying attention. The word hearken is shama. It means to hear intelligently,
Come on now.
to hear with implication of the intent. Listen to Sarah and listen to the intent behind what she's saying. saying.
Say that, yes.
And if the intent behind what she's saying is not what I told you, then you shouldn't hearken unto Sarah. That's the part that was left out. God said, hearken, listen intelligently to her intent. He didn't do that. He just listened. And Sarah said, I don't want them here no more. Get rid of them. They gotta go. And so he put them out. That was never God's intent. God had already blessed Ishmael. You had a blessing. He had a blessing living under his roof. More than that, he had a son that was already there, that God had already blessed.
Appointed, yes.
That God already said, I'm going to make sure he is, he's going to be blessed. He's going to be a father of a nation. He's going to have many descendants. I'm going to give him 12 princes. He's going to be a wild man. And a wild man doesn't mean that he's going to be wild. He's just going to be out there and running around and killing everybody. Because we already know he was a warrior. It meant that he was going to be nomadic. He was going to wander. And if you study, like we talked about the three, religions from Abraham. If you study the Islam religion, they were nomadic people back in the beginning with Muhammad. They were nomads. And we learned that this is, those are Ishmael's descendants. So they were nomadic. That's what the Bible means by wild, nomadic. So he wasn't listening intelligently. And sometimes we don't do that either. We're not listening to what, even I can apply that to my life today. I got up, I had an interview, I prayed, I said, God, I want you to open every door that needs to be opened. I want you to close every door that needs to be closed. And if I get to a closed door and it's not for me, help me to see it. Because I want to be where you want me to be. I want to be where I can be a blessing. I want to be somewhere where it's my time to be there. And if it's not my time, then help me to be content with that. So I get to the interview. Interview is going so well. It's just going wonderful, marvelous. Like, I see them taking notes and they don't see that I brought my glasses and I can see what they're writing. So I'm knowing I'm going to get a call back, right? So I get the call back. And I knew right off the bat that I didn't get it. Because he started with the speech, well, we went through all the applicants. And I'm like, whatever. But then he kept talking, and he, kept talking and was saying how great I was and how he loved this and this and this. And I know that he went to bat for me because he said, and when I talk with HR, because principals don't talk with HR. They send a name, and HR says yes or no. This is done through email. They don't talk to HR. So he said when I talked to HR though, they were just adamant about that EC, early childhood, through 6th grade certification. Other than that, you were the perfect applicant. I'm just so sorry, we need that EC through 6. So I was certified about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. During that time, everything was different. So the certification I got was EC through 4th grade. So I'm only certified to teach up to 4th grade. It changed the semester I graduated. So I had an option, stay another semester and you can get EC through 6. Graduate and you're just EC through 4. I was like, So, and they changed it because of that. It was EC through 4 or 6 through 8. Which leaves 5th grade empty. And principals were having a hard time finding teachers to teach 5th grade. Because if you got 6 through 8, that means you wanted to teach middle school. You didn't want to teach elementary school.
Right.
And if you were only EC through 4, you couldn't teach 5th grade even though you were at an elementary school. They couldn't hire you for 5th grade because you weren't certified. So they changed it. when I hung up the phone, I was at peace.
Hallelujah.
I actually had a smile on my face because I knew that God had heard me. I had listened intelligently. I could have been like, you know what? I'm just gonna apply somewhere else and do. But I was listening to what God was saying through him. All of those times when you were wondering why you didn't get that second call back, or all of those times where you left out and they pretty much told you got the position, once they called HR, it was a different story. He was just the one that called me back to let me know. That was because I prayed that morning and I had asked God for peace. Let me be content and let me know where you want me.
Yes.
And what God is saying is not your time, but my time is coming.
Hallelujah.
And now that I know what I need to do,
Yes.
when my time comes, I'll be fully prepared. But right now, I'm content.
Come on.
I'm content, and I'm actually happy to be a third grade math teacher. Yes, y'all, I will be teaching people's children math next year. So, but what I'm saying in all of that is, listen, don't always just reject and get angry and walk in flesh and walk in self and get upset, because sometimes it's just not your time. Sometimes you gotta listen to what God is saying, or you're gonna mess up something, you're gonna miss something. Like Abraham was not listening to what God was saying, and he missed something. He missed his blessing. That was Ishmael, because he went and he put him out. Okay, so Ishmael was already there, and we've established there was no prerequisites and no anything. Now, if Ishmael is already there, and he's already blessed, and Isaac is coming, and he is the promise from God, I'm not going to let anybody